It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Jeff Levin. Jeff has devoted his professional life to helping people to move their lives forward. He grew up in Newton, Mass., and is a graduate of Dartmouth College, Boston College School of Education, and the Smith College School for Social Work. He began his professional career as a middle school English teacher in Carlisle, Mass., back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Just kidding. And since then, Jeff has helped individuals and groups for more than 40 years in a wide variety of settings. In addition, Jeff was a practicing psychotherapist for over 25 years. Now, for the last 15 years, Jeff has been a life coach based in New Hampshire and Boston who works with both individuals and groups. He's been a consultant and coach to parents, families, schools, teams and athletes, and corporations all over the U.S. His proactive workshops, all of which include Jeff's live musical performance, often with audience contribution, are relaxed, great fun, inspiring, and practical. He tries to find balance in his life by playing and singing blues and rock and spending as much time as possible outdoors. Let's not wait any longer. Here's Jeff on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Jeff, thanks for being a guest on the podcast. Happy Friday.
Oh, my pleasure, Joanna. Happy Friday to you. Listen, I'm sitting on my porch in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire, so I'm sure your listeners can delight in the sounds of some of the bird song around me.
I'm excited. Well, A, it's just good to see you, and I'm excited to finally rope you into being a guest on the podcast because I feel like we've had multiple conversations specifically in working with young adults, and there's always conversations around expectations or success, and especially when we're dealing with parents. So I want to hear a little bit of your story, and then we'll kind of wrap up with what it is that you're doing now so that folks can connect with you.
Okay, fabulous. So when you say my story, I'm 68, so where do you want me to jump in?
Well, why don't you let's go back to like your emerging adult years. So first of all, I'm sure some people listening might be able to geographically place you based on your accent. Mm-hmm. But for those who may not know, tell us where you grew up. And then also just what was the messaging that you were receiving about what you were supposed to do when you graduated from high school?
I grew up in Newton, Mass., which is a Boston suburb. I grew up in a middle-class home where we had materially everything we needed. My dad, however, fell in a bottle of booze when I was about 11. He fell from grace in my eyes. He was a Phi Beta Kappa college athlete, fought in World War II guy, but I think wasn't able to ask for help, which would be typical with greatest generation men anyway, and was working in a family business that I don't think suited him or excited him in any way, and he drank alcoholically for 30-something years, and eventually booze killed him. So that certainly shaped my psyche, as you might imagine, but obviously it was a very different time growing up in the 60s and 70s, and I went to college and majored in psychology and probably fooling around more than I should have, but graduated from college and then worked in that same family business knowing it wouldn't last. And I think in retrospect, I did it in deference to my father in some sort of convoluted, painful way, but did it. And then thought, what the heck am I going to do now? And I went to Boston College and got a teaching degree, and I taught junior high school, which doesn't exist. It's middle school now, but I taught junior high school English in ex-urban Boston in a little town from 1980 to 84 or 85. And I had too much ADD, which wasn't a thing, but I had it and I have it. And I couldn't get organized. Mr. Levin, did you correct our spelling tests? No, probably not. But you love us, right? Yeah, I love you kids. But it was really actually very, very stressful. But in any event, I went to Smith and got an MSW, and I finished in 86. So now I was a fancy psychotherapist, and I worked in schools, and I eventually had a private practice. And to attempt to summarize probably 25 years or so, I was never enamored with the 50-minute hour to be a therapist, particularly as it bore upon kids. You know, where you go every Tuesday at 10 o'clock and there's no contact in between sessions and it goes painstakingly slowly. So I shifted 12 or 15 years ago and I became a life coach in the absence of knowing what the hell else to call myself. And I took some training as a life coach, but having been well trained at Smith, I sort of feel like I knew most of it. The biggest thing I learned from the life coach training, Joanna, was that it was about positivity, and it was about the future, and it was about change. That piece of it I really resonated with. For the last 12 or 15 years, I've been working with young people and their families, and in some cases with kids who are literally and psychologically stuck, who haven't left their house, who smoke weed, who push buttons, who blame their parents, who don't have the ego artillery to even get on the runway, let alone off of it. That's a lot of my journey. If you're asking me the expectations as a young adult, the thing I think about all the time is that even with an alcoholic dad and so on, my friends and I learn through osmosis a lot of the skills I think people need to be successful. We learned that life was joyful. We learned that we would figure it out, quote unquote, that we had the goods to figure it out, that we had each other, that we would be fine. Those were the subterranean messages, I think, that got transmitted to baby boomers, at least the guys I knew and the women that I knew. I was telling someone today, I knew no one who cut herself, killed themselves. To this day, there was one fella I tangentially knew in college who died at what we think by his own hand. But my experience growing up, and then I'll be quiet, was that it's just so very different than what young adults are experiencing today. And I can feel it and I can see it.
Yep. I'll just ask one question about your past, and then we're just going to talk about young adults now, because I think that really is kind of the meat of what it is that you do and what makes you really appealing to families that are listening to this. If you just having heard kind of the journey, right? Like the nonlinear path, the career shifts, is there anything that you would look back on in hindsight? Would you change anything?
Guys in my age bracket are asked that all the time, right? So the normal answer is no, it happened the way it was supposed to happen. And I feel like that's the answer that I would honestly give. I wouldn't change anything. I would probably smoke less marijuana as a kid because I think I used it as a cocoon. But I had to go through that and learn that. I probably would have played basketball competitively into high school because I'm crazy about basketball. And I wish I had played in high school, but I was too, I think, cowed by the sequelae of my dad's disease to really go for the gusto in that way. But those are probably the only things. You know, I tell kids today that I could have played D3 basketball, which I think I could have, and it would have been fun. But, you know, if those are my only two things I'd change, I'm doing pretty good.
All right, so let's shift, right? Let's talk about who it is that we're working with right now. The young person that is at home, smoking way too much weed, super stuck. Why do you think we have had such a swing generationally in this like self-efficacy of launching into adulthood? Like from your perspective, what are you seeing? Why do you think this is happening?
I think before I answer, I think the general public is flummoxed by this, and I don't think people have had the time to really think about it and analyze it. You know, what I think has happened actually in the end of the day, because I've thought about it and written about it a lot, and talked to a lot of kids and a lot of people about it, it's a three-pronged monster. There is now sitting in our lap an overwhelming tragedy list. The top 5 items on which are complete dysfunction in Washington. Washington, D.C. is a joke. And I don't think anyone would argue with that, except maybe the people that work there. And I think if they were honest, they'd agree. So that's 1. 2 is random violence, a lot of it in schools. 3 is phone addiction, which is a complicated topic. 4 is global warming. And 5 probably would be the opiate epidemic. COVID was not helpful either. And then if you throw in Columbine, all these school shootings, the economic crash in 2008, which was caused by, according to financial guys I know, caused by 300 greedy people, none of whom ever paid any consequence. And then you put COVID on top. The country has been through so much SHIT that we as adults are not dealing with any of those phenomena, not dealing effectively with global warming, we can't agree on anything. And so I think that feels really out of control to people. So the second of the three-headed monsters is we call the new parenting playbook, where I overprotect my kids. No offense to parents listening, but I overprotect my kids and thus underprepare them for a very complicated world. You know, it reminds me of high-level Buddhists. They have monks that when they walk, the monks take a broom and sweep the path of the Buddhist guy so he won't step on any bugs, which is done for a nice reason because we don't want to kill bugs. But parents are snow plowing kids' pathways and are at the same time overscheduling them. And a lot of parents, not all, but they have a vision for who Jennifer or Kevin needs to be. And it usually includes going to a, quote, good school, getting, quote, good grades, looking good and achieving stuff. And that is the reaction to the overwhelming tragedy list, in my opinion. It's an elegant psychoanalytic theory that can't be proven necessarily. And then the third thing is that Generation Z all have outcome fever, which is a term my wife said to me in this house one day about 2.5 years ago. She said, all these kids you talk about, they base their identity and their value on how they look and how they do. And that's what I meant, Joanna, earlier when I said, like, back in the day, we lived by the idea of work hard, have fun, treat people right, have fun, chase your dreams. And what will be, and it will probably be fine. Well, I've been working with kids intimately for 44 years. You can tell I'm on a diatribe. Modern kids today, I work with a lot of sports teams. I'm in rooms with very successful, a Hockey East hockey team out here that's big deal, like some of the best hockey players in the country. You'd think they'd be the happiest kids in the world. They're not. Because if they miss an open net, these kids who have outcome fever, who have been overscheduled and underprepared and overprotected, who live in a world where the adults aren't dealing with these massive geopolitical problems, they're fragile. And when they fail at their chosen endeavor, whether it's playing the cello or playing lacrosse, there's a fracture in their ego, right? There's a fracture in their sense of self. And that fracture just widens suddenly and brings them down. And then they're home playing video games and smoking weed and wondering what the hell happened to them. And I don't think it's complicated. I think it's that three-headed monster, honestly.
But for somebody that's got their head in the sand, they don't have the ability to step back and see that three-headed monster because they're literally, blinded by what's happening right in front of them. And I think what I'm describing is not necessarily even the young adult, it's the parents. We're just so activated all the time with all the things going on, but we're so focused on supporting our young adult, but we also don't have the ability to put our finger on the pulse of what's driving everything. So I'm glad you named it. You named it so succinctly and clearly. I hope that this just kind of like is a pebble in the pond for raising awareness for more parents that are saying, I don't understand why my kid is stuck, right? I don't understand why they won't just get out, right? And it's like, well, parents, we have to take a step back and look around what's impacting you, which then cascades down to your kid. And I think to your response, Jeff, it is a simple solution.
Yeah. And going back though a little bit, this is no one's fault. I feel like when you get parents honest, and I'm in a lot of homes and I do my work in the house, right? So when I get in the house, parents can gradually, with that kind of intense attention and focused conversation, they can begin to realize that they are not raising their kids remotely the way they were raised. That when I ask groups of parents, Joanna, what's the biggest difference between your son or daughter's experience and your own as a kid? They all say, oh, it was great when I was a kid. We came home when the streetlights went on. We had so much freedom. It was really cool. And then they go home and go on the grade portal and see that Diana got a B- on some chemistry test and all hell breaks loose. And through no fault of their own, modern parents have adopted a child rearing approach that simply, in the end of the day, doesn't work very well. I field all these calls because I work, doing my family intensive work and failure to launch and helping families around Boston. And I'm going to Nashville Sunday night, and I went to Oregon, and I want to get to sort of my conclusion around that in a second. But when I field these calls, right, And I usually talk to the mom and sometimes the dad. And they say, your work sounds great. And I give them 45 minutes of my time or an hour and we talk. And then they say, well, listen, we'll try to get Kevin to text you. And I say, wait, that's not optional. You pay for Kevin's entire life. Kevin is pissed off, high, inactive, stuck, and blaming you and creating havoc in your family. But a lot of folks haven't set a limit since Kevin was 3, because the sine qua non of child rearing today is the child's emotions. I'm upset. Okay, why? Well, it must be someone else's fault. I'm upset I didn't make the basketball team. Well, let me email the coach. No, you haven't been practicing. Maybe you're not that good at basketball. It's the dirty little secret, right? You're not that good. Maybe you're not smart enough to go to Harvard. There I said it. Maybe you'd be better match at UMass Boston. That's fine. It's not okay anymore to just be who you are. Therein lies the problem. And so I say, it can't be optional, Mrs. O'Brien. Have Kevin call me. Oh, man, I don't know, I'm excited because it's just so sad to me that so many kids are ending up in really deep sneakers, God forbid, in the form of self-harm, which is so much more common than it was, or, more pervasively, in a place where there's so much outcome fever in the kid's head that she or he cannot even hear the voice of his heart, as corny as that sounds. I mean, I heard B.B. King on the radio when I was 11, and I told my mother, I need an electric guitar. And she said, you do why? And I said, I heard a guy named B.B. King. I want to do what he does. And she said, awesome, let's go get you. And she bought an unplayable, I was 11. And this guitar meant the world to me. And I've made records, and music's super important to me. But I think there's so much static now that I'm convinced kids cannot hear. They cannot get in touch with their heart and their voice. And it results in a stress fracture in their identity. And it's awful. And I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm only one guy, right? Every psychotherapist in the Boston area is full. You can't get help. You can't get help. And so that's why we're trying to launch the Reconnection Project to crop dust parents and kids with knowledge, with that three-headed monster knowledge, because the whole thing is remediable if you have the knowledge of what went wrong.
Well, we'll make sure we have all of the links to all of these things, the Reconnection Project, your coaching website. Also, I think that you have talked about outcome fever before, and so there's videos out there, right?
Yeah. I'm ashamed to tell you this, but we're on TikTok. We said we've got to get the word out. We're on Instagram, which I think is owned by my good friend Mark Zuckerberg. I think Meta owns Instagram. And, there's a socio-political, if you follow the power and the money, there's a small minority of people doing very, very well on the backs of social media and on the backs of these kids whose thumbs are the strongest in the history of mankind, and it's not good. So anyway, sorry.
Well, no, all of this is to say why I started this podcast is exactly why you are sharing right now too, right? It's like we're constantly in this place where anything less than is unacceptable.
Correct.
And if you less than, it is just completely paralyzing. And so I'll use this as the last question, and it feels super loaded and it's appropriate, but having heard your own journey, knowing what it is that you do right now, do you see yourself as successful?
Yes, I do. I carry the mantle of any adult child of the alcoholic who's riddled with self-doubt. But the reason I feel super happy and excited and successful is I have helped a lot of kids. I have kids I taught 40 years ago calling me saying, Levin, how's it going? I know I've changed the course of the lives of lots of young people who now aren't young people. But the Reconnection Project excites my wife, Miranda, and me, and a couple of our colleagues, including Judge Broderick, whom I'd love you to meet. We'd love to come on here. We are poised, God willing, on my 68th birthday. I just want to keep on going and try to stay in good shape and drive this project and get the word out to kids. Because when you tell a group of kids, hey, you guys have outcome fever, their heads poke up. When you apologize for the world that we've given you guys with that overwhelming list, the heads come up. And when they begin to understand, yeah, I base my value on how I look and how I do, and you tell them there's an option, You can have French fries, or you can actually have a different meal, which is you can look in the mirror and like the kid in the mirror. And you can learn how to be happy in your own skin. It's deeply, deeply refreshing and maybe life-saving for a generation of kids who are really struggling.
Well, Jeff, I feel like you and I could literally have conversations endlessly about how to continue to help this generation of young people and how to continue to get the word out to the masses about self-acceptance, following your own path, not comparing yourself to others, not be based or focused on the outcome, but rather like the actual journey itself, right? Not the destination, to use that example. But we need more. We need more stories. We need more acceptance rather than the expectations driving young people off a cliff.
Well, one of the things we're going to do with the Reconnection Project is get the voices of kids on TikTok, God help us, on social media, on our website. Because when you talk to kids and you ask them what's wrong, particularly if they're college age, their brains are well developed enough to say, look, I'm under so much pressure, economic pressure, social, parentheses, media pressure. I don't want to have kids because of global warming. I mean, these kids are feeling underwater. And I think it's critical to give them a voice and let them know there are at least two adults called Joanna Lilley and Jeff Levin, at least, that are listening to them. And I think if we can tip the balance and get a critical mass of people that run schools where all the kids are, to just admit that we're not in a super good spot and let the lady on the school committee's head blow up because she doesn't want this said or something like that. We have to get educators to say, yeah, we're not in a good spot. We can educate these kids until the cows come home, but if they don't feel good on the inside, what's the point? So we want this to be almost like a movement, a social movement where adults finally say, yeah, we've made some mistakes. We're not in a good spot. Let's try to fix this. But the first step is acknowledgement. You can't fix a problem that you're unwilling to talk about. But I temper my frustration with the knowledge that people have been living their lives. They're running schools. Their jobs are on the line. They're doing the best they can. But I think the voices of kids are critical. And, I'd love to come on here again, or you can come on our podcast and get the word out there and keep talking about this and keep writing about it. And I think the voices of kids would be awesome.
Well, Jeff, thank you for taking some time sharing a little bit about your own story, the work that you're doing. And I know that there's going to be a lot of parents that are listening to this that are going to reach out to you, and maybe even young adults too, who are listening to this, interested in being guests on your Reconnection Project so that they can continue to be the voice, like you said, young people being
Please
out there.
Bring that on. Young people, parents, people that are hearing this message and resonating with it, I would love to hear from them. So I know you'll provide my email and my phone numbers and all that stuff.
All in the show notes. So if you're listening to this episode, check it out. Get in touch with Jeff. Jeff, thanks again.
Thanks, Joanna. Talk to you soon.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lillyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lillyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.